Hi you guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Liv. It's the end of the month, or I guess the beginning of a new month. So I'm going to tell you all about everything that I read in the month of April. April was like an okay reading month. I read some really good stuff and I read a bunch of stuff that I couldn't care less about. So that's kind of fun. Before we get into the actual books, I want to go through some stats because that's how we do it. I read 17 books in the month of April. A correction to last month, I actually read 18 books in March. So I just can't count. This time I counted 3 times, so I'm pretty sure I read 17 books, but we'll see when it gets to the graphs. So we'll start off as usual by genre. I read 1 classic, 5 contemporary novels, 1 fantasy book. I read 1 historical fiction, 5 memoirs, which is so weird, 1 regular nonfiction, 1 romance, 2 sci-fi, and that's it. Hopefully that adds up to 17. In terms of format, I read 5 physical books and 12 ebooks. And by source, I read 13 library books, 1 book that was gifted to me, and 3 books that I purchased myself. I actually didn't purchase any books this month, apart from 1, which was for book club. So I feel pretty good about that. And then age-wise, I read 15 adult books, 2 young adult books. My average days to finish a book was 3 days. My total number of pages read was 5,432, which is actually the lowest that it's been this entire year, which is, I don't know, a little disappointing, honestly, because I feel like I really made the effort to read some big books, but that's okay. We're going to get straight into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the book, some thoughts about it, and then we'll just move on to the next one. So the first book that I read in April was Let My People Go Surfing, The Education of a Reluctant Businessman. It's by Yvon Chouinard, who I think that's how you pronounce it. I know that he is the founder of Patagonia. This book was really, really good. It was recommended, I think, because I've been reading like books for work recently, like business books. And I've also read Barbarian Days, A Surfing Life. And this is kind of a combination of those 2 books. So honestly, my favorite like businessy book that I've ever read. I classified this one as memoir because it kind of was nonfiction about about the company and the business practices, but it was also a lot about like his life and his own philosophies. So yeah, it was really cool. Definitely my favorite businessy book that I've read. Made me really feel like Patagonia. I'm just gonna let that finish. Definitely made me feel like Patagonia is a good company to support. They have good philosophies behind everything that they do. One cool thing is that to build like a brick and mortar store, they never ever like make changes to the exterior, and if they can help with the interior of the buildings, they use what's there, and they kind of integrate it into their like kind of traditional format stores. So I thought that was really, really cool. There was also a really long section at the end about like environmental impact, which was just really interesting and great to read. The next book that I read was A Walk in the Woods, Rediscovering America on the Appalachian Trail by Bill Bryson. This was my book for my book club with my friends this month. It's the Bill Bryson book where he walks the Appalachian Trail. It's kind of explanatory by the title. I loved this book so much. I legit found it so funny. It was the funniest thing I've read in a really, really long time. It felt like very honest. I felt like this man had no place, like no place on that trail. Like to hike thousands of kilometers with like cakes and no preparation. It seems wild. But I literally read this in a day. Parts of it legit made me laugh out loud, and most of it just made me want to like get outside and go have fun doing that. So that was definitely a really good read, and I would highly, highly recommend it. The next book that I read was one of the fantasy books I read this month. It was the second of the Skyward, I think, duology by Brandon Sanderson, Starsight. So this one kind of continues on the story from book number 1, but it took it in a really different direction than what I had anticipated. So I think it kind of caught me off guard. I still really liked it. So much of it kind of brought images from different Marvel movies into my brain, so it was really hard to focus in on like this story. I was like, oh, it's just like this and it's just like this, and I kind of found it hard to have it as a standalone. But I love Spencer as a character. She's fun and she's energetic and she's super reckless, which is just a lot of fun. I feel like she's very relatable. It twisted and turned a lot. It kept me really on my toes. Definitely gonna be excited for when book 3 comes out. Probably won't read it immediately, but I did definitely enjoy it. Okay, the next book that I read, this is my book of the month, pick of the month, and I have it in hard copy. Oops. It's Dune. I read Dune, the whole thing. I've got this copy that is shorter and kind of, well, not shorter, but like squatter than a lot of other copies. So my copy of this book is like 900 pages. I think everybody else's is like 700 pages, but mine is 900 pages. It was long, but I read it. I really wanted to read this before the movie comes out. That was my main motivation, but I'm so stoked that I read it. It's my book of the month. It was so much more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. I've had this book since Christmas. It's now May, and I was so nervous to pick this up because it's really long and it's intimidating, right? Because this is like the book that changed sci-fi and is influential to like every other sci-fi book that's out there. I was really worried it was going to be a slog. But I can see why it's so influential. Some of the writing was like very formal, I found, which I think is just indicative of like the time that it was written. And one thing that most people say about this book is that you are thrown right in. There is very little like exposition. There's a lot of expeditions. Very little exposition. You just kind of are thrown in and you pick up stuff as you go, which I found really, really fun. There were some things I kind of had to Google because I was like, I don't know if I'm lost or if it's just gonna come later. But yeah, I feel like now that I've read this, I'm going to be able to continue through reading a lot more sci-fi with like a way deeper understanding. So I'm really, really excited about that. I'm probably not going to read the other ones in the series. I've heard that you don't have to. I probably won't. But I'm so stoked that I read this. I loved it so much. A good vibe. Okay, the next book that I read, I did read this in a physical copy as well, but I had to send it back to the library because I don't want to pay my late fees. So it was Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This book was a contemporary LGBT romance. Basically, it's about this girl, Grace, and she's been doing her PhD for like 1,000 years, because that's how long they take, apparently. She did a PhD in astronomy, which is just cool. And she goes on this girls' trip to Vegas to celebrate finishing that. She's a really hard worker, as I'm sure anybody who is getting a PhD is. And so this is like her one time to kind of like let loose. We don't see any of like the Vegas letting loose. The book starts off right after that. Turns out that she drunkenly gets married to this woman whose name she just like doesn't know, and they're just married, and she kind of has to go home and go back to her like military father and like back to like his plans for her life. This book was so good. Like it was filled with so much love and like community, and like how like your love can have no bounds, and finding your place in the world, and like it made me smile so much. The writing was absolutely stunning. It was a great, I guess, like coming of age kind of story. I loved it because even though it was a romance, the romance wasn't the central focus of it. It was just kind of a part of her life, and I found that really fun because that's what it is. The next book that I read was A Burning by Megha Majumdar. This book was recommended to me, I think, because of all the Ya Jessie books that I've read. The cover of this book is really, really similar to like all like Transcendent Kingdom and like all of those books. Homegoing, the cover looks exactly like that. But basically, this book was a debut novel by the writer. I have never really read anything like this before. I'm going to read you the blurb because it's easier that way. Basically, It's about Jivan, who is a Muslim girl who comes from a very poor family, and she's determined to like move up in life. But she's accused of executing this terrorist attack on a train because of some comment that was like found on her Facebook. It's 3 different perspectives. That's one. Another perspective is PT Sir. He is this gym teacher who like hitches all his aspirations to this really right-wing political party, and you kind of find that like his ascent up is directly correlated with Jivan's like kind of fall down. And then the other character is Lovely, who is a irresistible outcast whose exuberant voice and dreams of glory fill the novel with warmth and hope and humor. Those were not my words, those were the blurb's words. But Lovely has the alibi that can set Jivan free, but it will cost her everything she holds dear. It was a great book. The perspectives were different enough that it was so easy to follow. They all start really, really separated. They come together. Pretty classic. It was a really great novel. And I think I read this one pretty fast as well. The next book that I read, this one was a disappointing one. This was Neither Here Nor There, Travels in Europe by Bill Bryson. I chose to read this Bill Bryson book after I read the other one because it's the same characters. It's him and his buddy Katz. And so this book is obviously his travels around Europe. And like, yes, it was funny, but I found it like a little entitled. You know how I just have this memory of when I was in Venice with my mum one time. We were sitting at this patio and we would watch people as they're coming down the stairs, and you can pick which people are American, no offense. And this just came off like every single one of those people. It was like entitled and kind of mocking, but like not in a super funny way, in a kind of offensive way. Like just different customs and things that he saw and places he was staying and people he met. It just kind of didn't hit the right tone with me. So not for me, but maybe for someone else. The next book I read, I also gave back to the library. It is called The Divines by Ellie Eaton. I read this book because I think it was like a Reese Witherspoon pick of the month or something, and it was described as like normal people and girls, and it oscillates between present day Los Angeles and then a British boarding school in the 90s, and I love a boarding school story. I love them. So this book was about so the school is called St. John the Divine, and all the girls that go there, they call themselves the Divines, and it's like this very elite school, and they're all known for like flipping their hair and like being rebellious and smoking cigarettes and being like really, really loyal to each other, and they all call each other like boys' names, which was like it's kind of weird, but then going to like a private school, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like everybody has a nickname. Nobody calls each other by their real names. And so the kind of catalyst of this book is that she's like going back to some reunion. It's all very cliquey, and then this whole time you're like, oh yeah, this girl they jumped out a window and she died. And that's kind of what she's ruminating on for the whole novel, and she's really obsessed with like ice dancing because that's what the girl did. It twists and it turns, and like as these memories kind of resurface, she kind of spirals back into that headspace. It was so readable. Like not that much happened in this book because it's all just kind of like fragments of the narrator's, like Joe's memories, but also like a lot happened, and you're suddenly like, how did we get here? I loved how like weirdly real this book was. So it was a good read. The next one that I read was Eat a Peach by David Chang. This book, really I wanted to read because the cover is beautiful. It's about David Chang, who is the founder of Momofuku, which I think Vancouver might be getting one soon. So that's exciting for us. I kind of thought this book would have like recipes in it. And I was really excited for that, but it's a memoir of his like journey to creating his restaurant. It was super interesting to see his like business thoughts, especially compared to Patagonia. I think they both have like great business practices. I don't know a lot, but from what I can tell, they both have good business practices. And this book made me hungry for noodles, like excellent food descriptions in this one. The next book that I read was also one that I didn't really enjoy. I was really hoping I would like it more. It's an adult fantasy called The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. And basically it's about this group of siblings who in the 60s, I forget how it happens, but they all kind of like learn their date of death. And each section of the book, like there's 5 sections, is divided up into each of the siblings. It just like wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't like it either. It felt really, really predictable. Like the premise was so wonderful and so fun. We got to travel through all these different like kind of decades, just depending on when each person was gonna like, you know, come to the end of their lives. But it just felt really, really reductive. Like there's one of the siblings is like a gay guy in New York in the 80s, and like you can just, what's the most stereotypical thing that you can think of? Like that's exactly what happened. And as soon as it was kind of mentioned, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I just lost interest. There were so many points where I almost DNF'd this book, but I didn't, and I'm rating it a 2 out of 5 stars, if we were rating by stars. The next book that I read was Bring Up the Bodies. This is the second book in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel. This one was really close to making it to be the top book of the month, but then I figured Wolf Hall was already January's top book. It's going to be really hard for me to have to pick between them, so we're just going to leave it with Wolf Hall, unless the third one is even better. So this is the sequel to Wolf Hall. Henry VIII is now married to Anne Boleyn, but he's like... How rude. He is done with her. He's tired. She is not giving him the son that he wants and apparently needs. And now that Catherine of Aragon is now, she was not like killed, but she has now passed away, and it's like got the full brunt of like the hate from all the people who want to hate. This book was just as good, honestly, an way easier read for me than the first one. I feel like Mantel was kind of like poking fun at herself when writing this, because one of the big criticisms that people have on Wolf Hall is that they're like, oh, I actually have this book. I should hold it. My cover's different from everybody else's cover from what I've seen, but this is secondhand. So people talk about Wolf Hall and they're like, who is this he? Like, why is everybody just he? And most of the time he is Cromwell. So she kind of pokes fun at that in this book, and I really appreciated that. It felt very self-aware. So I really loved that. So basically the whole theme of this book is that Thomas Cromwell is like bringing Anne Boleyn down. Finishes, well, we all know how the Anne Boleyn story ends. That's exactly how it ends. But there was so much in here that was, it was just such a delight to read. You can really see Cromwell as a character just getting a little bit more like sinister and schemy, and I really, really enjoyed reading that. I'm so excited to read the final book in the trilogy this month. I'm going to start it very soon. Okay, we're down to the final few. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more books. The next book I read was What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Murakami. Everybody's reading Murakami right now, so I didn't want to be left out, so that's what I'm reading. I feel like if you don't like running, then you probably won't like this book. Like, it was a simple read. It was enjoyable. It's about his kind of journey through life, but also through running and endurance and challenges and people. It was just very like enjoyable and funny and playful and philosophical kind of outlook on life through the lens of movement, and I really enjoyed it. And it was really short too, also less than 200 pages. That's why my page count is so low this month. I'm reading all these short books. Next book I read, not super important, but I read this book for work. It's called Chief Customer Officer 2.0. I'm not really going to talk about it. It was good. Like, it was fine. It was repetitive, as all of these books are that I'm reading. Like, I feel like most of this stuff could be done in an article and nobody would know any different. Next book I read was Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This book was amazing. I wish I owned it. Like, I wish I had a copy of it, because I feel like I want to write all over it and and do all that. Essentially, this is the story of Willis Wu, and he like doesn't, it's kind of written in the format of like, I guess, a screenplay-ish. It's very, very descriptive, and basically Willis doesn't perceive himself as like the protagonist of his own story, of his own life. He kind of moves through being generic Asian man to like old Asian man to, and like he has dreams of being kung fu guy. It's a really, really interesting look into like Hollywood tropes and stereotypes. It kind of combines this, like the storyline of what's going on with this observance of like the industry that he's so familiar with, and I found that very interesting. Really, really heartfelt. I really enjoyed this book. Super, super interesting. The next book I read it in like not long at all. I was in my book club meeting on Zoom, and we were talking about books that we'd read in school, and one of the girls brought up this book called The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and she was like, oh, it's like the scariest thing I've ever read. And I was like, oh, I can read a classic, let's do it. It was really creepy. Basically, it's about this woman and her husband. They go and they rent this summer house, and like the husband is like, hey, you're insane, you have to stay in this room. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'm insane, I have to stay in this room. This book is 63 pages, it's very short. But it's really creepy, really claustrophobic. One of those super weirdest things that I've ever read. There's a quote in it: if a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? And it's just like written in this very, very calm way, that's just kind of like spiraling. Like I feel like in an audiobook format this would be creepy. Okay, the next book I read was for my podcast book club. I'm going to talk about next month's book club as well, but this month, or last month, was Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. I love this book. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Basically, it is telling the story of Talia and her family, who are Colombian immigrants to the US. It kind of talks a lot about immigration and the American dream, and how most of that, or like the American dream, is nonsense, but it's very hard to realize. There are so many stunning quotes in this book. I folded down so many corners for things that I really want to go back to. The ending of this book moved me so much. I went into this book with like very, very high expectations from the people that had recommended it to me, but I still didn't really know what to expect because it's a short book. It's told through like 5 POVs, which is a lot, and I really think a couple of them could have been missed out, but that's okay. It was written with so much compassion, and just it talks a lot about like familial love and dependence and care. Okay, the final book. I feel like I've been talking at a breakneck pace, which I have, and that's okay. The final book that I read this month was, again, so hyped up everywhere on the internet. It's The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Basically, it's about this guy Linus, and he's this like rule-following government employee who's sent to go, he's summoned by, it's really funny, it's all capitalized, the extremely upper management. He's given this assignment to go travel to this island which has this orphanage where these 6 like dangerous children reside, and they all have like special talents. One of them is like the son of the Antichrist, which is just freaking wild. I love it. There's this like green blob dude, there's this were Pomeranian, which is the cutest concept that's ever existed in a book. I love it so much. But the island is like keeping all these secrets, and their caretaker is this guy Arthur, who cares so much about these children, and the book is about found family, which is like, again, the best trope ever in a book. Basically Linus has to make a choice to like destroy the home and this life, or like watch the world go to the shit. So this book was really cute, really simple. I obsessed over parts of this. Like, it was such a calm, cozy, gorgeous read, but other parts of it I was like kind of bored. It took me a little minute to get into it, as I did find it a little slow going, but the characters in this make the book. Like, it was so gorgeous, so cute. Yeah, definitely a bit of an odd read, but really fun. It kind of read like a children's fantasy book, but it definitely was not for children. It's definitely an adult book. But yeah, it was such a kind book. So that was what I finished with. I was really hoping to get one more book done this month, but I'm ebook reading. I have about 100 ebook pages left, and I'm tired of looking at a screen today. So that's going to be it. But really quickly before I leave, my book club book pick for this month is going to be Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. Super excited to read this book. It's her debut novel. It paints an unforgettable portrait of 3 women who wrestle with questions of motherhood and family making, destined to be a 21st century classic. But that's it, team. That is what I read in the month of April 2021. If you've read any of these books, if you want to listen to the pod, everything will be in the description. Leave me a like or a comment. That's so cringe, but that's it. Thanks.